Marcus thought I was in the living room watching the game, but he had no idea I was in the kitchen washing dishes. He'd left his phone face down on the counter next to the coffee maker, the kind of thing people do when they forget someone else's home. I could hear the voicemail clearly, a woman's voice, quick and professional. "Hi, just confirming the Calloway account transfer on Friday. Donna's ready. Call me back when you're free." I stood at the sink with a plate in my hand for 4 seconds. The Calloway account. Jamie's kennel. The business she built herself and named Calloway Kennels because it's our family name and she's proud of it, just like I am. I dried the plate. I put it on the shelf. I went back to the porch, where my daughter was laughing at something Marcus had just said. The potato salad was being passed around the table. I took the bowl when it was my turn and scooped some onto the plate. Nobody at that table knew what I had just heard. It was a Sunday in March. What followed spanned 3 weeks, required an entire court filing cabinet from Macon, Georgia, and a Friday night at a steakhouse in Charlotte. Before I tell you the ending, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications. Welcome to Revenge Blueprint. If you love true stories of dads who see danger before anyone else, you've come to the right place. Follow me to the very end, because the part I think about most isn't that Friday night. It's the Sunday morning 3 weeks later when my daughter called and asked, "Dad, how long have you known?" My name is Frank Calloway. I'm 64 years old. I spent 28 years with the Gaston County Fire Department in North Carolina, most of those years as a crew lieutenant out of Station 4 in Bessemer City. I retired in 2018 with a left shoulder that had been surgically reconstructed twice and a ringing in my right ear from a warehouse fire in 2009 that nobody on the crew talked about anymore, but that most of us still thought about on quiet mornings. My wife Ruth died 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, which hits fast and does not negotiate. We were married for 31 years. She was a school librarian for 24 of those years, and she had a laugh that could carry from the kitchen to the back porch without effort, and she read 3 books a week until the last 2 months when she couldn't hold them comfortably anymore, and I used to read to her after that, which was the most intimate thing I have ever done. The house has been quiet since she died in a way I have learned to live inside but have never learned to call acceptable. I have one daughter, Jamie, 32. She works as a veterinary technician for a small animal practice in Gastonia and runs a boarding kennel out of the back of her property on weekends. 6 dog runs she built herself with help from the neighbor's kid, and 3 YouTube tutorials she watched until she had them memorized. Ruth would have loved that. The specificity of it, the way Jamie decides what she wants and then figures out how to make it exist. Jamie met Marcus Hale about 2.5 years ago at a charity event in downtown Gastonia. He was in his mid-30s, handsome in a deliberate kind of way, the way some men are handsome because they have worked at it. He carried himself with the ease of a person who has never been particularly uncertain about a room, and he said he worked in commercial real estate investment. He had a quality of attention when someone was talking to him that made you feel, briefly, like the most interesting person present. The first Sunday he came to my house for dinner, he helped me carry a cooler from the truck without being asked. He shook my hand right firm, direct, didn't hold it too long. He asked me 3 specific questions about the fire service and listened to the answers instead of waiting to talk. He ate everything on his plate and thanked Jamie for the meal in a way that was genuine rather than performed. I didn't trust him. I want to be honest about that and about what I mean by it. It was not a specific thing. He didn't lie to my face that day. He didn't say anything wrong. It was smaller than that, a quality I noticed only when he thought no one was paying attention. When the conversation was on someone else and he thought he'd disappeared from view, something shifted in his face. A brief, quiet inventory of the room, not anxious, just calculating. The way a man looks when he's making a decision rather than having a good time. I have worked in burning buildings for 28 years. You learn to read structures to hear what a building is telling you before it tells you loudly. Some structures give you obvious signs. Some give you quiet ones, early ones, that only make sense after the fact. I had learned to trust the quiet signs as much as the obvious ones. But I told myself I was being a difficult father, because that's also what I am, and I knew it. I have spent Jamie's adult life managing the specific tension between protecting her and letting her live. After Ruth died, Jamie had 2 hard years quiet, closed down, working too much, sleeping too little. She came back to herself slowly. Watching that happen, watching her laugh again at my kitchen table on a Sunday evening, I wasn't going to throw a shadow on it because I had an instinct I couldn't put into words. So I was polite. I made room at the table every Sunday. I handed Marcus the potato salad and asked about his projects and nodded along to the answers. Ruth had a pocket watch that belonged to her father. She kept it on the kitchen windowsill. It stopped working the same week she died, and I never had it repaired, and I never moved it. It still sits on the sill by the sink, stopped at 6:47. I look at it every morning while the coffee brews. It doesn't tell me anything useful. It tells me everything I need. I thought about that watch a great deal in the 3 weeks after the Sunday in March. There were things I had noticed before the voicemail. I want to be fair about this. They were not things that proved anything. They were the quiet signs, the structural readings that I was still in the habit of filing away without acting on. Marcus talked about his business in a specific way. He used confident language. Our investor group, the Hilton Head Development, Phase 1 delivered strong returns, but the language never had anchors. No specific address for the development. No specific closing date. No specific dollar figure you could look up independently. Every answer I asked him directly produced a sentence broader than the question, like he was always slightly retreating to higher ground. He was good at it. You had to listen carefully to notice that the retreat was happening. I also noticed that over the past 6 months, Jamie had changed the way she talked about her finances. She didn't talk about them much at all anymore, which wasn't like her. Ruth had raised her to be practical about money, not obsessive, just clear-eyed. Jamie used to mention the kennels expenses with a working it out quality, thinking out loud. That had gone quiet. Once in February, when I asked her how the business was doing, she said, "Marcus is helping me think about the finances differently." And she said it the way people say something when they've borrowed words that still feel slightly foreign in their mouths. But none of that was enough to act on. I told myself, difficult father, instinct without evidence. Then came the Sunday in March. I went inside to do the dishes the way I always do. Ruth started that habit during our early marriage, making use of the cleanup to give the company room to breathe. And I kept it after she died because it's one of the dozen or so daily things I kept just to feel the shape of her in them. Marcus had left his phone on the counter. The voicemail came through on speaker. "Hey, just confirming the Calloway account transfer for Friday. Donna's ready on her end. Call me when you can." 4 seconds with a dish in my hand. Then I dried it, went back to the porch, potato salad, said nothing. On Tuesday, I went to Jamie's house under the pretext of needing to borrow her laptop. She and I shared a Google account she'd set up years ago for the kennel scheduling, so I could help cover when she was away. I wasn't going to read her emails. That's a line I thought about and didn't cross. But the automated banking notification summary that Google pulls in as a sidebar, the kind that just shows transaction summaries in a widget that was sitting there on the right side of the screen when I opened the browser. 2 wire transfers in the past 30 days, both going out of Calloway Kennels' business account to an entity called Hale Property Partners, LLC. Total, $6,200. I wrote the name down in the small notebook I keep in my shirt pocket, a habit from the fire service, where you wrote down every reading so you didn't rely on memory when things moved fast. I closed the laptop, thanked Jamie, drove home. That evening, I called Wade Odom. Wade was with Gaston County Fire for 11 years before he went back to school at 40 and got a paralegal certificate. He works freelance now for a Charlotte firm that does commercial litigation, mostly handling document research and public records requests. He is 59, methodical, and possessed of the kind of institutional patience that lets him spend 3 days in a county clerk's archive without losing his mind. I had known him since he was 28 years old and terrified and doing everything exactly right in his first year at the station, and I trusted him completely. I told him what I'd heard and what I'd found. I told him I didn't want to go to Jamie with any of this until I knew whether it was real. Wade asked 2 or 3 clarifying questions, the kind he asks when he's already building the shape of the research in his head. Then he said, "Give me 4 days. Don't say anything to her. Don't ask Marcus anything. Just act like Sunday." I acted like Sunday for 4 days. I mowed the grass. I went to my Tuesday breakfast at the Cracker Barrel on New Hope Road, which I have been doing every week since the year after Ruth died, sitting in the same corner booth, ordering the same thing: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, black coffee. The waitress there is a woman named Sheila who has worked that booth for going on 11 years and who knows my face and my order, and by now, a fair amount of my life. She asked me that Tuesday how my daughter was doing. She's good, I said. Is she still seeing that fella? She is, I said. You like him any better than you did? I poured creamer into my coffee, even though I always drink it black. Then I looked at it and pushed it to the side. He's got a nice handshake, I said. Sheila gave me the look she reserves for things she has decided not to push on. I drank my coffee without the creamer. On Thursday afternoon, Wade called. Hale Property Partners LLC, he said. Registered in Delaware. Registered agent is a mail forwarding service, no physical address, no employees, no website beyond a one-page placeholder. Filing date is 3 years ago. No state tax filings in North Carolina, South Carolina, or Georgia beyond the initial registration requirement. No licensed real estate broker under that name in any state I could find. What else? I pulled Mecklenburg County Civil Court records. There's a complaint filed against a Marcus D. Hale 2 years ago by a woman named Patricia Nesmith, Macon, Georgia. She's a medical office administrator. She says she met him at a regional Chamber of Commerce event. He introduced himself as a commercial real estate developer with a small investor group putting together a mixed-use project. She wired him $34,000 in 3 installments over 4 months. The project never existed. He told her the deal fell through and offered to roll her investment into his next opportunity. She declined and filed a civil suit. Was it prosecuted? Civil suit dismissed. Insufficient evidence of fraudulent intent. The agreement was worded to classify the funds as an investment at risk rather than a guaranteed return. No criminal charge. Her attorney said the contracts were specifically designed to make fraud very difficult to prove. I was quiet for a moment, looking at Ruth's pocket watch on the windowsill. She's in Macon? Yes. I want to talk to her. A pause. Frank, you know she might not. She filed a civil suit 2 years ago, I said. She's still angry enough to have tried. She'll talk. I'll get you her contact, Wade said. I called Patricia Nesmith Thursday evening. She was silent for a long moment when I explained who I was and what I was asking. Then she said, my daughter said someone would call eventually. She told me I needed to talk if they did. She talked for just under an hour. I want to tell you something about that conversation, because it mattered in a way that went beyond the information it gave me. Patricia Nesmith had been sitting with this for 2 years. She had filed a civil suit, watched it get dismissed, and then had nothing to do but wait and keep her files organized and tell herself that someday someone would call. When I explained who I was and why I was asking, there was a pause before she answered that I understood completely. It was the pause of a person deciding whether this is going to be another dead end or something different. She decided to trust it. I don't take that lightly. She described Marcus Hale the way you describe someone you've had a long time to think about. Not with bitterness, or not only with bitterness, but with the exhausted precision of a woman who has spent 2 years reconstructing how it happened, so she can understand the pieces that felt obvious in retrospect and invisible. At the time, she described the first meeting, the second, the way his questions about her life felt like genuine interest before she understood they were reconnaissance. She described the presentation folder glossy, professional, detailed in the specific ways that make a person feel they're dealing with someone serious. She described the project renderings, a boutique hotel component, retail space, residential above. Everything a reasonable person, looking at it in the context of a professional introduction and a polished pitch, would find credible. The thing I keep coming back to, she said, is that none of it was obviously wrong. That's what I've had to make peace with. It was designed to be exactly as convincing as it needed to be. Not more. Just enough. I understood that. A fire set by someone who knows what they're doing doesn't look like what people expect a fire to look like. It looks like a perfectly ordinary room until it doesn't. She described the woman named Donna. She came to 2 of the early meetings, Patricia said. She was presented as the lead private investor, the one who had seeded the project, and was bringing in the smaller partners. She was poised. Mid-40s, dark blazer. The kind of woman who looks like she does this professionally, like she has 3 other deals running, and this one is the smallest of them. She knew the industry language. She answered questions correctly. She was very good at it. Did she give a last name? Sutton. Donna Sutton. A pause. But after everything fell apart and I started trying to find any of them, after Marcus stopped returning calls and the project address turned out to be a vacant lot in downtown Hilton Head, I found a post on a private Facebook group for fraud victims. A woman in Fort Lauderdale had put up a warning about a woman using the names Donna Pierce and Donna Sutton in real estate investment pitches in Georgia and Florida over the past several years. She had a photograph in the post. Did it match? Yes. Her real name appears to be Donna Pierce. There were 2 complaints filed against her in Florida, according to what the Facebook post said, but neither went anywhere because the investment contracts were written to classify the money as risk capital rather than a guaranteed return. The contracts are the key. They're specifically designed to make fraud extremely difficult to prove. I thought about that for a moment. How long did Marcus spend with you before you signed anything? 4 months, she said. He met me in September, and I signed in January. He was patient. He was very patient. He never pushed. Every time I asked a question, he welcomed it. He said he actually said once, "I want you to be completely comfortable before you commit to anything." I remember thinking, what a good sign that is. I wrote down everything she told me. Date of first contact, date of transfer, the LLC name, the specific language in the contract, the name of the Facebook group. I asked Patricia if she would speak with investigators if the situation required it. "I have been waiting 2 years for someone to take this seriously," she said. "I will do whatever is needed." Before we hung up, she asked me something. "How old is your daughter?" 32, I said. "Mine is 34, she said. "She's the one who told me to keep talking if anyone called." She said, "Mom, you have to help the next one." A brief pause. "I hope your daughter comes out of this okay." "She will," I said. "She's her mother's daughter." I did not explain what that meant. I didn't need to. I thanked her and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a while. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the dark. The refrigerator hummed. Ruth's pocket watch was frozen at 6:47 on the windowsill. I thought about the $47,000 Ruth had left Jamie in a savings account designated for expanding the kennel. The money Ruth had set aside while she was sick, in the specific way of a woman who was thinking clearly about what would be needed after she was gone. The money Jamie had mentioned twice in the past 3 months, in the context of when I'm ready to add more runs. I thought about how long it had taken Marcus to get to this point. 2.5 years. 2.5 years of Sunday dinners and handshakes and sailing stories and being present enough to learn what Jamie loved and what she was building and what her mother had left her. I got out the yellow legal pad I keep in the drawer by the kitchen table, and I wrote down what I had, every piece, numbered. Then I called Wade and told him I needed one more thing, the woman named Donna Pierce, everything he could find, and whether Jamie had any meetings scheduled that involved signing financial documents. He called back the following morning. "Donna Carla Pierce," he said, "born 1976, a fraud alert filing in Broward County, Florida, from 2019. Same pattern as your Macon story, different entity name. No conviction, but the complaint documentation is detailed." And Frank Jamie called our firm's intake line earlier this week, asking for a referral to a real estate attorney to review investment documents before signing. The associate gave her the name of someone downtown. I don't know if she's had that meeting yet. I closed my eyes. When did she call? Tuesday, while I was at Cracker Barrel discussing handshakes. "Call me back in 20 minutes, I said. I stood at the kitchen window. The October light was low and clean, coming across the backyard at a flat angle that made the shadow of the fence post stretch halfway to the house. I had lived in this house for 32 years. Ruth had planted the rose bushes along the fence in 2003, and they had survived every winter since. And I had never learned the first thing about caring for rose bushes because Ruth said it was the one thing in the yard that was hers. They were still doing fine. I watered them when it didn't rain. I called Wade back and told him to find out when the Friday dinner was and where. I called Jamie on Friday afternoon. I asked about her week the way I always ask, and she told me about a difficult case at the veterinary clinic, a golden retriever with a complicated surgery, a good outcome. And I listened fully and asked about the dog, and she told me the dog was going home Monday. Then I said, "You mentioned Marcus had a dinner tonight. Investment group thing?" "Yeah, it's in Charlotte, a steakhouse downtown. He's bringing the investor group together to hear the full presentation." A pause. "The lead investor is coming tonight, Donna. The woman I told you about. She's flying in from Atlanta. Sounds like a big step, I said. It is. Another pause, and in it I could hear Jamie choosing how much to say. Daddy, I'm going to go in on it. The project. I've been thinking about it for a few months. I talked to a real estate attorney on Wednesday, and he said the documents look standard. How much are you thinking? The minimum is $40,000, but Marcus said for me he'd bring it down to. She stopped. The full 47, Mom's money. I want to use it to do something real. I was very careful about the next 10 seconds. I had lived with the instinct for 2.5 years, and I had kept it quiet, and I needed 20 more seconds of quiet. I think your mom would be glad you're building something with it, I said. Have a good dinner. Tell Marcus I said hello. I hung up. I called Wade. Tonight's the night, I said. I'm coming with you. We met in the parking lot of a gas station 2 blocks from the restaurant at 6:45 inches the evening. Wade had printed the research summary 8 pages. The Delaware LLC filing, the Mecklenburg complaint, the Broward County fraud alert, the Facebook fraud warning page with the photograph of Donna Pierce, a screenshot of Patricia Nesmith's contact information. He handed me the folder in the car, and I went through it quickly. She may not look like the photo exactly, Wade said. I'll know when I see her, I said. 28 years reading structures. You develop a recognition for certain kinds of surfaces. You know Jamie is going to be angry, he said. Yes. You ready for that? I thought about it honestly. I've been a firefighter for 28 years, I said. I've been a father for 32. Of the two, fatherhood is harder. Wade almost smiled. We walked in. The restaurant was the kind of place with dim lighting and dark wood paneling and prices on the menu with no dollar signs, which I have always found to be an affectation that does not improve the steak. The host started to say something about a reservation, and I told him I was joining the hail party, and he walked us to the back. There were 8 people at a large round table. Marcus at the near end, Jamie to his left. She saw me come through the door, and the expression on her face cycled through surprise, confusion, and then the early formation of anger in about the time it takes to exhale. Dad, what are you? I heard you had a dinner. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Wade took the seat next to mine. I wanted to come support you. Marcus looked at me with an expression that was doing a great deal of work. His control was considerable. Frank, great to see you. We didn't know you were coming. Last minute, I said. I smiled at him, the smile I had practiced for 2.5 years, the same one I gave him at Thanksgiving, at the July 4th cookout, at the birthday dinner, the one that cost me nothing and gave him nothing. He introduced us to the other guests, 2 couples in their 50s, each of whom looked the way people look when they are about to invest money they have worked hard for. A younger man who turned out to be Marcus's colleague in the LLC. And an empty chair. Donna Pierce arrived at 7:20. Dark blazer, hair pulled back, a leather portfolio under her arm, and the specific posture of someone who has been confident in rooms like this for a long time. She moved around the table with handshakes and easy conversation. When she got to me, she held my hand a half second longer than the others and said, "Are you one of the investors?" "I'm Jamie's father," I said. She absorbed that. She sat down. The presentation was 40 minutes, projected on a tablet propped on the table, the Hilton Head project, the projected returns, phase 1, phase 2, the boutique hotel component, the residential, the retail. A rendering that looked just professional enough to be credible. Donna Pierce narrated most of it with the fluency of a person who has given this presentation enough times that it has become genuinely second nature. She answered questions well, not perfectly, but well enough that the 2 couples were leaning forward by the end. Under the table, Wade had his phone flat and was scrolling slowly through the research folder. I watched him glance up twice. The second time, he met my eyes and gave one small nod. The photograph on the Facebook fraud warning page matched the woman across the table. I said, "Excuse me for just a minute." I pushed back my chair. I walked through the dining room to the lobby. I called the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department non-emergency line and said I needed to report a suspected fraud in progress. I gave the restaurant address. I gave the names Marcus Hale and Donna Pierce. I described the nature of the scheme. I gave Wade's phone number and said he had 8 pages of documentation. The dispatcher was efficient and calm. She told me a unit would respond. I walked back to the table and sat down. I poured myself a glass of water from the pitcher. Marcus was talking about the timeline for closing the investor group end of the month, documents by Friday the following week. He was very good. The warmth in his voice was exactly calibrated. The two couples were nodding. Jamie looked at me from across the table. You okay? Fine, I said. How's the steak? Have you ordered yet? She looked at me the way she has looked at me a few times in her life, when she is not sure whether to be concerned or irritated. She had not ordered. None of us had. The officers arrived 11 minutes later. Two plainclothes. They came in from the lobby the way people do when they know the nature of what they're walking into patient. Measured, not alarming the room before they needed to. They spoke to the manager. Then they walked to our table. The sound at the table changed. The kind of silence that happens when 8 people simultaneously realize that a room has just become a different room. Mr. Halle. Marcus stood slowly. Whatever he felt, his face was still working. There's clearly some kind of misunderstanding. Sir, we'd like to speak with you outside. Donna Pierce reached for her leather portfolio. Wade said, very quietly, from the chair beside me, Ma'am, you're going to want to leave those documents on the table. His voice was the voice of a man who has spent 20 years in legal environments and understands exactly how to make a request sound like an instruction. She looked at him. She set the portfolio down. I watched my daughter's face while both of them were walked to the lobby. Jamie was not crying. She was looking at the space where Marcus had been sitting with an expression I recognized in the way you recognize something you hoped you would never have to see, the expression of someone trying to reconcile two images of the same person that will not resolve into one. The two couples were gathering their things and speaking quietly to each other. The younger colleague was looking at his phone. Jamie, I said. She didn't answer for a moment. How long? She said. Very quiet. Since March. The dinner at my house. The voicemail. Yes. She absorbed that. The room was mostly empty now. A waiter stood at the edge of the dining room, looking uncertain. Wade set the printed folder on the table in front of her. When you're ready, he said, not forcing it, just making it available. She put her hand flat on top of the folder. She didn't open it. Donna Pierce, Wade said, has 2 outstanding warrants in Florida. Marcus Hale has an outstanding criminal complaint in Mecklenburg County from 3 years ago, a second victim filed last spring. The Hilton Head development does not exist. The LLC has no business activity except receiving wire transfers. Marcus was detained that night. When the officers ran his name, the outstanding warrant came up immediately, and he was held on that pending the investigation. Donna Pierce was identified and held for questioning. She had the warrants in Florida. She was eventually transported. Jamie drove herself home. She didn't let me walk her to her car. She sent one text at 10:48 that night. I need time. I wrote back, okay, I'm here. That was all for 23 days. I want to be accurate about what those 23 days were like, because a man my age has learned to be accurate about the hard things rather than softening them. I have been through silences with people I loved. Ruth and I went through a genuinely painful one in 1998, about 2 weeks, over her mother's funeral and the way I had not handled it the way she needed. I remember the specific quality of those days, the awareness of someone existing in the same world as you and choosing not to reach across it. The way the ordinary sounds of a day, a phone that doesn't ring, a porch light that stays dark become information about a relationship. This was harder because I did not know what Jamie's silence meant. She might be processing, she might be grieving the 2.5 years and slowly arriving at understanding. Or she might have landed somewhere colder on the decision that I had been a controlling father one time too many, that I had finally found a way to ruin something she had built for herself, and that this was her clean notification that she was done giving me the opportunity to do it again. I genuinely did not know which of those was true. That uncertainty was its own kind of weight. In the fire service, we have a term for the period when you are inside a structure and you have lost your primary orientation, and you do not yet know which way leads out. We call it getting turned around. It sounds mild. It isn't mild. The instinct when you're turned around is to start moving to do anything rather than hold still in the smoke, but the correct response is the opposite. You stop. You feel for the floor direction, the heat source, the air current. You do not move until you have a read. Moving before you have a read is how people die. I held still for 23 days. I went to Cracker Barrel on Tuesday. Sheila asked about my daughter. Working through something, I said. Bad? Could be good in the end. Can't tell yet. Sheila refilled my coffee without asking. Those are the hardest ones, she said. The ones where you have to wait to find out which thing it was. She said it simply, the way she says most things, with the ease of a woman who has been watching people have their Tuesdays in a corner booth for 11 years and has developed a practical philosophy about it. I thought about that sentence for the rest of the morning. I replaced the weather stripping on the front door that had needed it for 6 months. I cleaned the gutters, I raked the leaves from the backyard and put them in bags by the curb. I did the things you do with your hands when your mind needs to work through something without you directing it. I called Wade once a week for updates on the investigation. It was proceeding at the pace of these things deliberately, with a great deal of paperwork, and with the particular institutional patience of a county district attorney's office that knows a case like this requires documentation that will hold up under scrutiny. Patricia Nesmith had been contacted. 2 more victims had come forward after Marcus's name appeared in a brief local news item about the arrest. The investigation was widening in the way these things do once the structure has identified other people recognizing the same pattern from their own experience, finally having somewhere to put what they had been carrying. I stood at the kitchen sink every morning and looked at Ruth's pocket watch. Stopped at 6:47, the second hand still. The face clean because I had always kept it clean, which was the only form of care I had known how to give it. I thought about Ruth with a specific intensity during those 23 days that went beyond her usual presence in my daily life. This was something sharper, less ambient, more direct. I was thinking about what she would have known and when, and what she would have done with it, and whether she would have been proud of the way I had handled the past 3 weeks, or whether she would have looked at me with those eyes of hers and said something that would have been entirely correct and somewhat uncomfortable. My honest guess is both. That she would have said, "You were right about him, and you let it go 2 years too long. You know that." And I would have said yes. And she would have said, "But you did it right when it counted." And that would have been the end of it, because Ruth believed in completing an accounting and then setting it down. I have not been as good as she was at the second part. On a Sunday morning in April, 23 days after the Friday dinner, my phone rang at 8:15. I was at the sink. I saw Jamie's name and picked up. Daddy, 2 syllables. The particular 2 syllables that tell a man, in the instant before any other words, everything essential about the state of his child. "I'm here," I said. I went through my bank statements, all of them, 4 months back. Her voice was careful, the way voices get when someone has rehearsed what they're going to say, and then found that the rehearsed version isn't quite right and is reconstructing as they go. I found the 6 transfers, the $6,200. He told me they were management fees for the kennel expansion planning. I authorized them, Daddy. I signed off on the transfers. I know. I didn't look at where they were going. I know. A silence. Then, when did you know? The exact day. The Sunday in March. His phone on the kitchen counter. The voicemail. "You sat there and passed the potato salad." "Yes." "You didn't say anything for 3 weeks." I needed to know what I was looking at before I said anything. I was afraid of being wrong. A longer silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different, not softer, exactly, but the rehearsed quality was gone. "Were you afraid I wouldn't believe you?" "Yes," I said. She exhaled. The long, slow kind. "I was so angry at you," she said. "At the restaurant, when the police came in, I thought you had somehow set it up, that you'd been looking for a reason." "I know what you thought," I said, but Wade had the documentation. Patricia Nesmith had records going back 2 years. "Yes, I called her," Jamie said. Patricia Nesmith. "I found her number in the documents Wade left with me. I called her last week. That surprised me. I didn't say anything. She was very kind," Jamie said. "She said she was glad I called. She said she'd been hoping someone would eventually tell her it mattered that she'd kept the records." I stood at the sink and looked at the pocket watch. "Daddy." "Yeah. Mom's money is still in the account." I didn't sign the transfer. The appointment with the Charlotte attorney was scheduled for Monday and I hadn't gone yet. "I know. I was going to." "I know that too." She was quiet for a moment. "Can I come over?" she said. "I'll make coffee," I said. She was at my door in 40 minutes. She sat at the kitchen table and I put Wade's folder in front of her. and she read everything thoroughly and without rushing, going back twice over sections the way she does when she wants to be certain before she moves on. She asked questions I answered honestly. She asked about Patricia Nesmith in Macon. She asked about the Delaware LLC and the Broward County filings. She asked when I had first suspected. 2.5 years, I said. She looked at the table for a moment. You hit it well. I wasn't hiding it. I was telling myself I was wrong. She looked up at me. Were you wrong? About some of it, I said. I spent 2.5 years managing the instinct because I was afraid of being the kind of father who ruins things for his daughter. That's a real fear. I am that kind of man, in some ways. I've had to fight it for 30 years. But the instinct was right. The instinct was right. She looked at the windowsill. At Ruth's pocket watch, stopped at 6:47. She always looks at it when she's at my house. She'd have known in the first month, Jamie said. Not as an accusation. More like a fact she had worked out before today and was saying out loud for the first time. First month, I agreed. What would she have done? I thought about Ruth, the specific, careful, generous way she operated in rooms. The questions that felt like warmth and were also very careful listening. She'd have invited him to Sunday dinner and asked him about his family. Not aggressively, just in that way she had. And she'd have found the silence, where the story ran out. Jamie almost smiled. It was the beginning of one, the kind that takes a few weeks to arrive fully. Daddy, she said. Yeah, I'm glad you went to Macon. I looked at her. You are? I keep thinking about that woman. Patricia. Waiting 2 years for someone to show up and go down there. She closed the folder. I called her, last week. I know, she told me. She said she'd been hoping someone would eventually tell her it mattered that she kept the records. Jamie set her hand flat on top of the folder. It mattered. Outside, the November light was going flat and pale, the way it does in the afternoon in North Carolina when winter is close. The rose bushes along the fence were bare. I had watered them through the summer the way I always do, and I would cover them in December the way Ruth showed me, and they would come back in April the way they always do. Make me a cup of coffee, Jamie said. I got up and made her coffee. We stayed at the kitchen table a long time, talking and not talking, the way we do when we're all right with each other. When she left at noon, she hugged me at the door the way she hadn't in a long time past the natural stop of it, 1 extra second. See you Sunday, she said. See you Sunday, I said. Here's what I want to say carefully, because the careful saying of it is the point. I am not a perfect father. I made real mistakes in this story, and I need to name them without softening them. The first, I knew something was wrong with Marcus Hale for 2 years, and I talked myself out of my own reading because I was afraid of my history. I am a difficult father. I have had to learn, over 32 years, the difference between the instinct that protects and the instinct that controls. And I have not always gotten that distinction right. The 2 years I spent telling myself it was just a controlling instinct were 2 years I spent letting Marcus Hale become more embedded in Jamie's life and more embedded in her finances. That is on me. I hold that. The second, I should have found a way to talk to Jamie earlier. Not with accusations, not with the full case I didn't yet have, but with honesty. Something like, I have a feeling about this man, and I don't know if I'm right or just difficult, and I need you to know that I'm paying attention. That conversation would have cost me something, her frustration, maybe her anger, the risk that she would have said I was being the difficult father again. I was more afraid of that than I should have been. I could have lost the $47,000 because I was afraid of a hard conversation. That is the version of this that lives in the back of my head, and I do not expect it to leave. I also want to say something about Marcus Hale that I have been sitting with since the October sentencing, because honesty requires it even when it's uncomfortable. What he did was deliberate and predatory. He chose to do it, repeatedly, with careful preparation and full awareness of the harm. There is no version of it that I soften. But the patience he brought to it, 2.5 years of Sunday dinners and handshakes and listening well and making Jamie feel genuinely seen, that kind of patience does not come from nothing. It requires a certain kind of discipline, a certain capacity for presence, something that could have been different under different conditions. I don't know what those conditions would have been. I'm not his therapist. But I noticed it at the sentencing, standing there watching him enter his plea. He was not a hollow person. He was a person who had made a series of specific choices that narrowed who he was allowed to become, and he had made them consistently enough that by the time I passed the potato salad on a Sunday in March, the person across the table had been building this particular future for nearly 3 years. That is both harder to protect your children from than a monster, and more instructive if you want to understand what you're actually up against. Monsters are obvious. This was not obvious. This was specifically designed to not be obvious. The danger was in the comfort of it. What I am sure about, and I want to say this plainly, is that the attention saves you. The specific, patient, ordinary attention you pay to the people you love. The kind that notices small things without dramatizing them. The kind that files what it notices without immediately acting on it. The kind that trusts a pattern to reveal itself clearly if you stay present long enough. I spent 28 years in burning buildings. The first rule we teach at the academy, and the last rule, and the rule that contains all the other rules, is this. Read the structure before you commit. Take in what the building is telling you. Trust the quiet signs as much as the obvious ones. Do not let what you feel make you faster than what you know. That applies to every structure worth protecting. If you are a parent, if you have a feeling about someone in your child's life that you have been talking yourself out of because you're afraid of your own history, I am not telling you to act on it rashly. I am telling you not to dismiss it, to stay with it, to find out what it actually is before you decide it's nothing. Because the cost of being a difficult father when you were right is a conversation you can apologize for. The cost of being a comfortable father when you were wrong is something else entirely. Con men are patient in the way predators are patient. They give you something comfortable to look at, and they wait, and they rely on you looking at the comfortable surface long enough that you stop noticing what's underneath it. The most dangerous fire is the one in the wall. Marcus Hale pleaded guilty in October to wire fraud and 1 count related to the outstanding Mecklenburg warrant. The plea included restitution to Patricia Nesmith and 2 other victims. Jamie's $6,200 from the kennel account was included in the restitution order. She'll see some of it back eventually. These things move slowly. Donna Pierce pleaded separately. She received 4 years. Patricia Nesmith attended the sentencing hearing in Mecklenburg. I had never met her in person before that day. She was a small, composed woman with reading glasses on a chain and the posture of someone who had been holding herself steady for a long time. We shook hands in the courthouse hallway. "Did they get you any of it back?" I asked. "Part of it," she said. "More than I expected, honestly." She paused. "Thank you for believing me and for going down there yourself." I thought about the drive to Macon, 2.5 hours each way. A woman I didn't know sitting across from me at a kitchen table, explaining the shape of a thing that had cost her $34,000 in 2 years of carrying it alone. "I'm sorry it took someone else's daughter for it to matter," I said. She nodded. "It usually does," she said. "That's the part that stays with me." Jamie moved back into her old room at my house for 6 weeks after everything settled. She brought Pepper, her border collie mix, who spent the entire 6 weeks sleeping under the kitchen table and looking at me with an unconditional acceptance that I found, in the specific way of animals, and extremely steadying. We didn't talk about Marcus every day. Most days, not at all. We talked about the kennel, which dog runs needed reinforcement before winter, whether the new booking system she was trying was worth the subscription cost, the ongoing saga of the cat who had bitten 3 vets in a row and remained entirely unrepentant about it. We talked about Ruth sometimes. That was new, and I was careful with it. After Ruth died, talking about her had been something Jamie and I did carefully, briefly, sideways, like looking at something too bright. This was different. We were talking about her directly. Jamie asked me things about her mother that she had maybe been afraid to ask when Ruth was alive, or too raw to ask in the years after. What she was like when she was afraid. What she was like when she was wrong about something. Whether she had ever been wrong about me. "More than once," I said. "Like when?" She thought I was going to quit the fire service after the first year. Said I seemed like a man who'd find a reason to leave. Jamie smiled, a real one. "She was wrong about that." "She was wrong about that," I said. "She told me so on our 10th anniversary. Said it was one of 2 times she'd badly misjudged me." I asked her what the second time was. "What did she say?" "She said the second one she wasn't ready to admit yet." I paused. "She never did tell me. I used to think about it sometimes. I probably still will." Jamie was quiet for a moment, then, "That sounds like her." "Exactly like her," I said. She's in her own apartment now 10 minutes from my house, which she chose deliberately and which I noticed and did not point out. She added 2 new dog runs to the kennel this fall and hired a part-time helper on weekends. The business is building the way she always planned. Ruth's $47,000 is still in the account, designated the way Ruth designated it, for something real, built by Jamie's own hands. She went on 2 dates in the months after everything happened, both of which she described to me in the specific, measured way she now reports on her own life, accurate but not detailed, the way people talk when they've decided to be more deliberate about what they hand over and when. About the second date, she said, "He seems like a person who doesn't calculate." "That's a good start," I said. I told him about what happened. Not everything, but some. How did he respond? He said, "That sounds like it cost you a lot." And then he didn't try to fill in the silence. "That is a real good start," I said. She laughed a little. Then she said, "I'm being more careful now about what I show people and when. Not suspicious of everything, just more careful." "That sounds right," I said. "How do you know when it's too much?" The careful, I thought about that for a moment. When you're paying attention without it feeling like work, when you can still give someone the benefit of the doubt without giving them the whole house. She was quiet. Then, "Daddy, were you scared during all of it? The dinner, the 3 weeks, all of it?" "Yes," I said. "What were you scared of?" "Mostly," I said, "I was scared of being wrong. Of walking into that restaurant and having you look at me the way you did and it turning out I was just a difficult old man who couldn't let go." "But you weren't wrong." "I wasn't wrong, but I didn't know that when I walked in." She thought about that for a while. "I think that's the bravest part," she said finally, "going in anyway." I didn't answer that, but I thought about it afterward, sitting in the truck in her parking lot before I drove home. 28 years in the fire service, and my daughter was the one to tell me what courage looks like. One morning in late November, I picked up Ruth's pocket watch from the windowsill, put it carefully in my shirt pocket, and drove to a small repair shop on Main Street called Wren's Clock and Watch. Earl, the man who runs it, handles old timepieces with the kind of quiet seriousness that comes from a career of taking small, broken things seriously. He held it by the chain, tilted it toward the light, turned it over once in his hand. "Good watch," he said. "Kept clean. It'll run fine. Give me a week." I picked it up 7 days later. He had cleaned the mechanism, replaced 2 small interior components, and set it to the correct time. He held it out to me on the flat of his palm, not handing it over by the chain the way most people would, but held flat, the way you offer something that you understand has weight. I brought it home. I put it back on the windowsill by the kitchen sink. The second hand moves now. I stood at the sink that morning and watched it for a while. 6:47, moving through. 6:48. The coffee brewed. The November light came through the window at its low winter angle, the same light that has come through that window since 1991, the same light that crossed Ruth's face at this counter 10,000 mornings before me. Ruth stopped at 6:47. That will always be true. It is written into this house and into me, and I do not want it otherwise. But the watch is running now. And the running of it is not the replacement of the stopping. It is the acknowledgement that time kept going even when I wasn't able to. That the world continued past 6:47, and that Jamie is here, and the kennel is building, and the rose bushes survived another winter, and that all of that is something. I am 64 years old. I have been a firefighter and a husband and a difficult father, and a man who stood at a kitchen sink and heard 4 words, the Calloway account transfer, and did not flinch. I have been a man who waited 23 days with his daughter's silence in the house and kept the porch light on every night anyway, because that is what you do. The watch is running. The coffee is good. The porch light is on. That's enough. That is plenty. If you made it to the end of this, thank you. Hit that like button. Subscribe to Behind Dad if you haven't already. Share this with any parent who has ever had a feeling they talked themselves out of. And I want to ask you something I have been sitting with since March. If you had heard that voicemail on your child's partner's phone, would you have said something at the dinner table that same night? Or would you have waited until you knew more? Tell me what you would have done. Drop it in the comments. I'll read every one. Stay watchful. Trust the read. Keep the porch light on. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons, events, or locations is coincidental.